Don't click away, because if you thought you could sleep through this, you're about to realize the nightmare is only just beginning. Picture this. You think you understand 3I Atlas. You think you've read the press releases, seen the charts, heard the experts, and can go to sleep. Wrong. Dead wrong. Because while everyone else shrugs it off as just another interstellar visitor, the evidence is screaming at us in plain sight, like a warning flare no one dares to acknowledge. That 8:1 CO2 ratio, that isn't random cosmic chemistry, that's a recipe. Those improbable alignments with Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, not coincidences, that's navigation. And that sudden outgassing at 4.4 AU, where nothing should sublimate, that's not natural physics, that's activation. What I'm about to show you doesn't just dismantle comfortable theories, it exposes why the very people sworn to protect us are hoping you never connect the dots. Listen carefully. This isn't speculation. This is a blueprint that's been circulating for millennia, hidden in clay tablets, dismissed by academia, and now unfolding in real time before your eyes, here and now. Picture this. You think you understand 3I Atlas. You've read the press releases, you've seen the graphs, you've heard the astrophysicists calm the public with their rehearsed lines. You think it's just another cosmic rock, another comet passing through, here for a moment and gone forever. You think you can sleep, but you can't, because you're wrong. Dead wrong. While the experts play their game of distraction, while space agencies wrap every anomaly in technical jargon and bury the real story in footnotes, the truth is hiding in plain sight. That 8:1 carbon dioxide ratio? That's not a fluke. That's a recipe. Those trajectory alignments with Venus, Mars, and Jupiter? That's not chance. That's navigation. And that sudden outgassing at 4.4 astronomical units, the point where nothing should be able to sublimate? That's not physics. That's activation. Think about it. Natural objects don't rewrite the laws of chemistry. They don't hold on to a perfectly tuned atmospheric cocktail, carried intact across interstellar gulfs, only to release it at the exact moment when it matters most. They don't adjust their courses with the precision of spacecraft. But 3I Atlas does. It's acting like a mission, not a mistake. And yet, the mainstream story, the bedtime fairy tale we're told, is that this is nothing to worry about. Just another visitor, just another curiosity, just another comet. That's the lie they want you to swallow. Because the truth is far too dangerous. Listen carefully. This is not first contact. This is not some friendly alien technology flying by to wave hello. This is an operation. Precise, clinical, merciless. 3I Atlas is not here to study us, or to visit, or to test the waters. It is here for one purpose, to transform an entire planet. Not Earth, not yet, Mars. The planet we've spent decades dreaming about colonizing, turning into a second home. A place where humanity might survive if Earth ever becomes uninhabitable. The timing is not an accident. The chemistry is not an accident. The alignments are not an accident. Atlas is the key in the lock, the final delivery in a project that's been unfolding for longer than human civilization has even existed. Why Mars? Because Mars used to breathe. You've seen the data. Dry riverbeds, ancient shorelines, the chemistry of rocks that once touched water. Mars was alive once, until something stripped away its air, its warmth, its ability to support life. And ever since, it has waited dormant, frozen, silent, waiting for something to bring it back. Atlas carries exactly the payload you would design if you wanted to do that. 8 parts carbon dioxide to 1 part water ice. Enough CO2 to thicken an atmosphere, to trap heat, to melt the polar ice caps, to trigger a runaway greenhouse cascade. Enough water vapor to seed clouds, to spark rainfall, to awaken chemical reactions hidden beneath the dust. This is not random. This is engineering. And here's what should make you feel the chill crawl down your spine. The timing of Atlas's arrival. The 29th of October, 2025. The exact moment it swings just inside the orbit of Mars at 1.44 AU from the Sunday, a perfect position for atmospheric release, a perfect position for activation. But that date isn't just on NASA's calendar, it's written into history. The ancient Mesopotamian tablets, the same cuneiform inscriptions dismissed as myth, describe the return of sky gods every 3,600 years. They describe beings who came from the direction of Sagittarius, the same direction Atlas emerged from. They describe terraforming technologies, genetic manipulations, planetary stations. They describe leaving, but promising to return when the time was right. What if Atlas is the fulfillment of that timetable? What if the countdown is over? Now stop and ask yourself, why do you think every space agency is suddenly obsessed with Mars? Why are billionaires pouring their fortunes into Mars colonization? Why is Mars, out of all the worlds in our solar system, the one destination humanity seems desperate to reach, no matter the cost? Do you think that's coincidence? Or have we been nudged, conditioned, guided toward Mars, so that when Atlas arrives, we're watching, so that we see, so that we can't pretend this isn't happening? Because here's the brutal truth. Atlas doesn't need our permission. It doesn't need our cooperation. It doesn't even need us. It was coming whether we looked up or not. And that's the part that should terrify you. Natural comets don't act like this. Natural comets don't bend trajectories. Natural comets don't carry atmospheric starter kits across the void. Atlas does. Which means one of two things. Either it is technology so advanced we can barely comprehend it, or it is part of a process so ancient that our entire civilization is nothing but background noise to its mission. Maybe both. And if that's true, then everything you think you know about human independence, human progress, human destiny, it's all wrong. We're not the explorers. We're not the pioneers. We're the spectators in someone else's construction zone. Ask yourself, why is NASA silent? Why do ESA and JAXA and Roscosmos all issue the same bland statements, as if they were reading from a script? Why do governments rush into emergency meetings the moment Atlas's data goes public? Because they know. They know this is not natural. They know the implications. They know humanity is about to face a choice it cannot prepare for and maybe cannot survive. The choice of whether we accept our role in a project that began long before us or resist and risk being swept aside. So no, this is not just another interstellar curiosity. This is not Oumuamua drifting by. This is not Borisov tumbling through. This is different. This is a mission with a target, and the target is Mars. Within months of its arrival, if it deploys what it carries, Mars could begin to change. Its atmosphere could thicken, its temperatures could rise, its ice caps could melt, its deserts could breathe again, and humanity watching helplessly from the sidelines would have to face the shattering truth. We are not the terraformers, we are the witnesses, and maybe the subjects. Don't look away, don't close your eyes. Because if you thought you could fall asleep tonight and dream of distant stars, you're wrong. The nightmare is already here. Atlas is moving, its clock is ticking, and the transformation is about to begin. But if you thought Atlas was just another rock, wait until you see the chemistry that defies everything you know about comets. You think you know chemistry. You think cosmic dust and frozen gases follow simple, predictable rules. Carbon dioxide, water ice, methane, ammonia, random mixtures locked into dirty snowballs drifting through the void. That's the story you've been told. The comfort blanket of natural cosmic processes. But look at the data. Really look at it. 3. Atlas isn't random. It isn't dirty. It isn't simple. It carries an 8-to-1 ratio of carbon dioxide to water ice. Not 7-to-1. Not 9-to-1. Not a spectrum. Not a scatter. Exactly 8 parts. CO, 2. For every single part H, 2O. That's not chance. That's not cosmic roulette. That's a recipe. And here's the part they don't want you to hear. That ratio isn't just unusual, it's surgical, controlled. It's the mixture you would design if you wanted to restart a dead planet's atmosphere. The scientists who whisper behind closed doors know this. They've run the simulations. They've plugged the numbers into atmospheric models for Mars. And every time, the result is the same. Inject that precise cocktail into the thin Martian air, and you trigger a runaway chain reaction. Greenhouse warming, pressure increase, ice cap collapse, water vapor clouds, seasonal rain, rivers that haven't flowed for billions of years, flowing again. Life waiting beneath the surface, stirring awake. Think about the odds. Natural comets form in the chaos of collapsing clouds, in protoplanetary disks with dust and debris swirling at random. Ratios fluctuate wildly. Some comets lean heavy on water ice. Others brim with methane. Others carry complex organics in unpredictable blends. But none present with surgical precision like this. An 8-to-1 ratio across the mass of the body is not noise, it's intent. And intent means design. Ask yourself this. Why carbon dioxide? Why not methane? Why not ammonia? Why not nitrogen? Because carbon dioxide is the trigger key for Mars. The planet's soil is ready to absorb it. Its atmosphere is ready to thicken with it. Its frozen caps are primed to melt under it. CO2 is the lever that tips the entire Martian climate system from frozen desert to greenhouse incubator. Too little, and nothing happens. Too much, and the planet becomes a toxic furnace. But the right amount, the precise ratio, creates the perfect storm. That is what Atlas carries. That is what makes Atlas different. That is why the silence from official institutions is deafening. And don't fool yourself. They know. NASA knows. ESA knows. The Chinese Space Agency knows. Every single one of them has run the numbers. That's why the public data releases are vague, sanitized, scrubbed of detail. That's why the only papers discussing Atlas are drowned in cautious language and hedged conclusions. Unusual composition, unprecedented ratio, more study required. That's academic code for, we know what this means, but we can't say it out loud, because saying it would break the illusion. Saying it would admit what you're starting to see right now. But let me spell it out for you. If 3I Atlas deploys its payload at the right altitude and velocity, the transformation begins almost immediately. The Martian atmosphere, currently a thin whisper of CO2 at less than 1% of Earth's density, could thicken in months. Surface pressure could rise enough for liquid water to remain stable, temperatures could climb, releasing yet more trapped gases from the soil. Positive feedback loops once dormant could reawaken with terrifying speed. In less than a human lifetime, Mars could begin to resemble its ancient self. Blue skies, shallow seas, a breathable atmosphere within reach of technology only slightly beyond our own. That's what's on the table. And you still think it's an accident, but here's the darker question. Who chose that ratio? Who calculated the chemistry of Mars with such ruthless precision? Not now, but thousands of years ago, before human beings had even written their first words. Because the timing isn't random either. The 8-to-1 ratio only works now only in this window, only with Mars in its current fragile equilibrium, only with humans just advanced enough to notice, but not advanced enough to stop it. That's not coincidence, that's orchestration. And don't forget the cultural echoes. Ancient texts describing the return of the sky gods, bringing breath to the red planet. The Sumerians writing about Nibiru's elongated orbit. The myths of beings who turned lifeless stone into fertile ground. Were those stories allegory or memory? Did our ancestors witness an earlier delivery, an earlier engineered comet, a previous stage of the same operation? Did they record in myth what we now rediscover in data? Now ask yourself, why now? Why Mars? Why this ratio? Because it's not about exploration. It's not about curiosity. It's about control. Terraform Mars before humans can colonize it, and you establish the rules. You control the atmosphere. You control the climate. You control the future. Humans can only react, can only watch. And while we argue, while we post on forums, while we debunk and fact-check, the chemistry does its work silently, relentlessly, unopposed. This is the part that should keep you awake tonight. What if Atlas is not the first? What if there have been others, quietly seeding ratios, quietly triggering processes, quietly preparing? What if Earth itself carries the fingerprints of earlier engineering? Our air, our oceans, our DNA altered not by chance, but by intent. Atlas might not be a beginning, it might be the finale. The last step in a plan older than humanity, unfolding right on schedule. You think you understand chemistry. You think ratios are just numbers. But numbers don't lie. 8-to-1 isn't random. It isn't natural. It isn't chance. It's design. And design means purpose. Which means someone, somewhere, wanted this to happen. And if that doesn't make your skin crawl, you're not paying attention. So remember this, the 8-to-1 ratio isn't just chemistry, it's a signature, a fingerprint left on the cosmos by intelligence, older, colder, and far more powerful than us. A fingerprint that points directly at Mars. A fingerprint that says, the time has come. And the real question, the one that no space agency dares ask, the one you'll be asking yourself long after you've turned this video off, is simple. What happens next? Because if its ingredients don't add up, neither does its path, and the way it's steering will make your skin crawl. You think orbits are random. You think cosmic debris follows gravity like puppets on invisible strings, their paths dictated by chance encounters and celestial mechanics. That's the textbook explanation. That's the comfort story. But 3i Atlas doesn't play by those rules. Look closer. Its trajectory doesn't wander aimlessly. It doesn't drift like Oumuamua. It doesn't tumble like Borisov. No Atlas moves with intent, with precision, with purpose. And if you map its path through our solar system, something impossible emerges. Alignments. Exact alignments. Venus, Mars, Jupiter. Not approximations, not close calls. Direct intersections. Calculated with the kind of accuracy that natural physics simply doesn't produce. And here's the part you need to let sink in. These alignments aren't coincidences. They are too precise, too convenient, too perfect to dismiss. Venus first, where greenhouse chemistry runs rampant, an atmospheric hell that still holds the secrets of runaway warming. Mars second, the target, the waiting canvas for atmospheric renewal. Jupiter last, the gravitational giant whose pull can fling an object across the solar system or anchor it in place. 3 points, one line, a navigation path, a flight plan. Atlas is not drifting, Atlas is steering. Do you understand what that means? Natural comets don't steer. They don't alter course. They don't execute multi-planet trajectories that just happen to maximize gravitational assists while delivering payloads to exactly the right world. But Atlas does, and the data proves it. Subtle velocity changes, recorded over months of observation, showing tiny deviations from the path gravity alone would dictate. Deviations that add up. Deviations that reveal powered flight. Something on board is correcting the vector. Something on board is navigating. And yet what do the officials say? Gravitational perturbations, dust jets, surface irregularities, excuses dressed up in equations. But let me ask you, have you ever seen dust jets produce repeated course corrections that keep an object locked into planet-to-planet alignments? Have you ever seen sublimation push a comet into a perfect tri-planet trajectory? No, because it doesn't happen. Not by accident. Not by physics. This isn't random. This is intentional. Now step back and ask the obvious question. Why these planets? Why not Mercury? Why not Saturn? Why this specific path? Because it's not just about trajectory, it's about resonance. Venus shows what happens when CO2 runs wild. Mars is waiting to be revived. Jupiter provides the final gravitational slingshot. Together, they form a corridor, a test range, a delivery route, a staging pattern. This is not just a path through space. This is a designed course through history. And here's where the implications get darker. Track Atlas's path backwards. Rewind the celestial clock. Its origin point doesn't come from the chaotic halo of Oort cloud comets. Doesn't come from the predictable ecliptic of short-period objects. No, it comes from deep space. The thick disk of the galaxy, the old stars, the ancient neighborhoods, the kind of place where time itself moves differently, where chemistry is primordial, where civilizations could rise and fall before Earth had even cooled. Atlas didn't just stumble into our solar system. It's been on its way for millennia. And when you plot that line against ancient records, against the mythologies of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, guess what? The alignments match. The sky gods returning from Sagittarius. The cycles of 3,600 years. The same direction, the same timeline, the same path. Coincidence? No. Coordination. What we are seeing is not chance. What we are seeing is a plan unfolding, a mission carried out with astronomical precision, across distances so vast they make human ambition look like child's play. And yet here it is, arriving right on time, hitting its marks, like a spacecraft on a pre-programmed journey. So now ask yourself, Who set that path? Who calculated those alignments? Who had the power and patience to send an engineered object across interstellar space, timed to perfection, aligned with myths older than writing itself? The answers should terrify you, because they point to intelligence, to purpose, to control. And once you admit that, you can't go back. You can't cling to the comfort of random chance. You can't pretend this is just another comet. And here's the final gut punch. Alignments mean destination. They mean Mars is not a target of opportunity. Mars is the target, the bullseye. The one world in our neighborhood where the ratio matters, where the chemistry fits, where the history connects. And if Mars is the target, then Earth is the witness. We were meant to see this. We were meant to record it. We were meant to feel powerless in the face of it. And maybe, just maybe, we were meant to play our part in it. So don't fool yourself. This isn't random orbital mechanics. This isn't celestial coincidence. This is navigation. This is design. This is a message written in the sky, a mission playing out in plain sight. And the only question left, the one that should echo in your head long after this ends, isn't whether Atlas is navigating. It's what happens when it reaches its destination. And just when you think you've mapped it, Atlas does something no comet ever has: a move that looks less like physics and more like a switch being thrown. You think you know what outgassing means. You've seen the pretty time-lapse images of comets sprouting tails as they warm, the textbooks explaining how sunlight heats ice and makes it turn to gas. Sublimation. Simple, predictable, comforting. But 3i Atlas rips that comfort out of your hands, because it started venting at 4.4 astronomical units. Out where sunlight is weak, where nothing should be warming, where normal comets remain inert and silent. Out where physics says there should be nothing but cold. And yet Atlas began to breathe. That should stop you cold. This isn't a random puff of gas from some crack in an icy crust. This isn't the kind of sublimation you learned about in school. This is timed, controlled, activated. The data from the big scopes in Hawaii, Chile, and the Canary Islands all show the same thing: a sudden, uniform emission across the surface at a distance too far for natural heating. It didn't flare once. It didn't sputter. It switched on, as if someone threw a switch. And don't let them tell you it's volatile ices. We've catalogued hundreds of comets. We know how CO2, CO, methane, ammonia behave under solar radiation. None of them do this. Not like this. They vent unevenly. They outburst sporadically. They don't synchronize emissions at impossible temperatures. They don't produce steady plumes with consistent chemical ratios, like Atlas does. Only two explanations remain. Either Atlas contains some exotic compound no human science has ever recorded, or Atlas is using a technology that mimics outgassing as camouflage while doing something else entirely. Think about what happens at 4.4 AU. It's just beyond the asteroid belt, a region with minimal observation coverage. Earth is on the other side of the sunday. Space agencies are running on skeleton crews as budgets roll over. A perfect blind spot, a perfect time to deploy, a perfect time to activate. And that's exactly when Atlas wakes up. Coincidence or choreography? And here's what should really scare you. The spectral lines of Atlas's gas aren't just CO2 and H2O. Embedded in that mix are trace compounds, rare isotopes, heavy molecules, catalytic agents that don't belong in a comet. Catalysts that on Mars could accelerate chemical reactions by orders of magnitude. Catalysts that could unlock trapped volatiles in the soil. Catalysts that could build an atmosphere faster than any natural process could manage. These aren't random contaminants. These are additives, ingredients, enhancers. Ask yourself, what kind of intelligence designs a vessel to look like a comet, hides its systems under ice and dust, drifts silently for millennia, then activates itself precisely when Earth can't easily see it? What kind of project requires activation before arrival at the target planet, as if priming a mechanism, charging a reactor, or releasing drones? Because the timing at 4.4 AU is not just odd, it's essential. The chemistry of the emissions changed after activation, shifting closer to the ideal mix for Martian atmospheric transformation. That's not sublimation, that's preparation. Now imagine what that means for Mars. If Atlas is activating at 4.4 AU, what will it do at 1.44 AU when it passes inside Mars's orbit? What payload will it release? What systems will switch on next? And who or what is controlling those systems? Because natural comets don't change state in stages like this. They don't wake up. They don't behave like machines. Atlas does. I want you to hear this clearly. The outgassing at 4.4 AU is the smoking gun. It's the moment the mask slipped. It's the moment Atlas revealed it isn't just a dirty snowball. It's the moment it stopped being plausible to pretend this is all natural. And yet, the official statements continue. Unusual activity, volatiles at unexpected distances, cometary outburst, euphemisms to keep you calm, euphemisms to keep you asleep. But you're not asleep. You're here. You're watching. You're asking the questions they don't want asked. Why this timing? Why this composition? Why this behavior? Why now? Because this isn't a comet. This is an engine. This is a delivery system. This is a process older and larger than our species. And the cliff edge we're standing on is this. If Atlas is already active, we're past the point of prevention. It's in deployment mode. It's executing the next stage of its mission. And we're still arguing about whether it's even real. By the time consensus catches up, the activation sequence will be complete. Mars will be next. Don't tell yourself it's too far away to matter. Don't comfort yourself with the thought that this is science fiction. Because the vents at 4.4 AU aren't fiction. They're data, they're real, and they're the sound of a system turning itself on. So watch closely. Track the plumes, measure the ratios, ask the questions. Because what switches on at 4.4 AU is only the beginning. And what switches on at 1.44 AU, you're not ready for that. None of us are. Because the truth is, you're not watching a visitor, you're watching a world being rewritten, and the first life it's transforming might not be out there. You've been told the fairy tale. You've been conditioned to believe in the Hollywood version of first contact. Shining ships in the sky, a handshake, a broadcast. The whole world watching together as we meet another intelligence for the very first time. You think that's how it happens, but you're wrong, dead wrong. Because what's happening right now with 3i Atlas is not first contact. It's not aliens waving hello. It's not a curiosity passing through. It's not even about us. It's about something much bigger, something far more dangerous. It's about transformation. Think carefully. What does Atlas actually do? It doesn't send signals. It doesn't beam messages. It doesn't flash lights for us to decode. Instead, it carries chemicals, ratios, payloads. It outgasses where it shouldn't. It navigates when it shouldn't. It aligns with planets it shouldn't. That's not communication. That's construction. That's terraforming. And you need to let that sink in. This is not first contact. This is first transformation. And the target isn't Earth. It's Mars. Why Mars? Because Mars is the perfect candidate. Not too far, not too close. Frozen, but not dead. Water locked in its poles. Traces of ancient rivers and seas. Soil rich with carbonates and perchlorates, waiting for activation. A thin, fragile atmosphere begging to be thickened. Mars is the clay, Atlas is the sculptor, and the design is already in progress. And here's what nobody tells you. Humanity has been primed for this. We've spent decades dreaming of Mars. Billions poured into rovers, orbiters, habitat plans, colony blueprints. Elon Musk promising 1 million people on Mars. NASA targeting the 2030 seconds. Every science documentary painting the red planet as the next frontier. Coincidence? Or conditioning? Were we guided to obsess over Mars precisely so that when Atlas arrived, we'd pay attention, so we'd witness the transformation, so we'd accept it as destiny instead of questioning it as invasion? Because make no mistake, this is invasion. Not with armies, not with fleets, with chemistry, with precision, with patience. Instead of landing on Earth and risking resistance, Atlas lands on Mars. It transforms the planet silently, invisibly, while we watch. And once it's done, once Mars has air and seas and warmth again, what then? Do you think that world is being built for us, or do you think it's being built for them? Look back at the myths. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki using Mars as a way station. They said Earth was mined, humans were engineered, but Mars was the hub, the stepping stone, the staging ground. and they promised to return when their work was complete. If Atlas is here now, carrying the exact cocktail required to restart Mars, then this isn't contact. This is the return. This is the continuation of a project started before our species was even literate. And here's the part that should shake you. First, contact assumes equality. It assumes a conversation. It assumes choice. But transformation removes all of that. It doesn't ask. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care. Mars doesn't get a vote. Humanity doesn't get a vote. Atlas doesn't need permission. It acts, and the planet changes. That's what makes this terrifying. We've been waiting for aliens to talk to us. Instead, they're showing us the truth. We're irrelevant to the mission. Now ask yourself, what happens when Mars is transformed? What happens when a habitable world exists next door? Do you think it will sit empty, waiting for us to move in? Or will it already be occupied by those who sent Atlas? And if Mars becomes the new hub of activity, what does that make Earth? A partner? Or a resource zone? A second world in the system? Or just the background? Listen, first contact was never the point. First transformation is. Because the real power isn't in communication, it's in control. Whoever controls the environments controls the future. Whoever decides which planets breathe and which planets suffocate decides the destiny of every civilization within reach. And right now, Atlas is showing us who holds that power. Spoiler, it isn't us. And here's the cliffhanger you can't escape. If Atlas transforms Mars, what stops the next Atlas from transforming Earth? What if this isn't the endgame, but the test run? What if Mars is the rehearsal, the prototype, the warm-up act for something bigger? Because once you prove you can turn a frozen desert into a living world, turning Earth into whatever you want becomes child's play. You think you're waiting for first contact, but it's already here. You're looking at it. You're watching it play out in the data, and the truth is harsher than you ever imagined. Because it's not about meeting, it's about remaking. And the planet being remade is not ours. So stop asking when aliens will talk to us. Stop asking what words they'll say, what messages they'll send. They've already answered. Their language isn't speech, it's chemistry, it's trajectory, it's transformation. And the only question left, the one you'll still be thinking about when you can't sleep tonight, isn't whether first contact is real. It's how long we have before the next transformation begins. And if you think Earth is the stage, you're wrong. Dead wrong. The bullseye has been painted on another planet all along. You think ancient texts are just myths. Stories carved into clay by people who didn't know any better. Sun gods, sky gods, cycles, omens, superstition. That's what you've been taught. That's the safe version. But what if those myths weren't imagination at all? What if they were reports? What if the earliest written records we have are not about fantasy, but about memory? Because when you put the numbers together, the orbits, the timelines, the direction of travel, 3i Atlas doesn't just line up with planets. It lines up with prophecy. It lines up with the Mesopotamian clocks. Look at the tablets. The Enuma Elish, the Sumerian king lists. The Omen series Enuma Anu Enlil, cuneiform baked into clay 5,000 years ago. Over and over they mention a cycle of 3,600 years. Over and over they mention beings from the sky. Over and over they name a direction, the Archer, the Bow, Sagittarius. And where does 3i Atlas come from? The thick disk region of our galaxy, emerging from the direction of Sagittarius. What is its travel time to our system? About 3,600 years. You still think that's coincidence? You're wrong. Dead wrong. Those clocks weren't just myth. They were warnings, timetables, observations of a pattern repeating across generations. Our ancestors didn't have telescopes, but they had eyes, they had memories, they had teachers, and maybe, just maybe, they had contact. Because the Sumerians didn't just describe gods, they described engineers. They described those who came from above. They described a red station in the sky. They described a world elongated in its orbit, visiting every few millennia. They described bringing life where there was none. Now here's what should chill you. Scholars have always dismissed Zecharia Sitchin's translations as pseudoscience. They said he misread the cuneiform, that he twisted the myths. And yet one by one his errors keep lining up with new data. Mining operations older than civilization itself discovered under the African crust. Genetic anomalies in human DNA that can't be explained by natural selection alone. Mars, showing chemical traces of previous atmospheric manipulation. And now, Atlas, arriving right on cue. The pieces of a story written in clay and whispered through millennia falling into place in the sky above us. Think about the odds. An interstellar object arriving from the exact direction the ancients named, with the exact chemical payload described in their myths, at the exact time they calculated. If this were a movie, you'd call it lazy writing. But this is real. This is happening. And nobody in authority wants to talk about it because the implications are too big, too disruptive, too undeniable. And here's the part they really don't want you to connect. Those same texts don't just describe the arrival. They describe the departure. They describe leaving Earth for Mars. They describe building a way station on the Red Planet as a staging ground for their next phase. They describe terraforming technologies, not in those words, but in actions. Breath of heaven poured upon the red dust, waters brought forth where there was none, mountains made to smoke. Poetic descriptions of what we'd now call atmospheric engineering. Now ask yourself, if those texts were just stories, why are there details unfolding in our sky today? Why does Atlas carry exactly what Mars needs? Why does its timing match their cycle? Why do governments bury the anomalies instead of investigating them in public? Because acknowledging this would mean admitting our history is not what we think. Admitting our place in the cosmos is not what we think. Admitting that we are not the architects of our own destiny. Listen, the Mesopotamian clocks aren't superstition, they're a schedule. A cosmic calendar etched into clay by people who knew they wouldn't live to see it fulfilled, but wanted to leave a warning for those who would. That warning is for us, for you, right now, as you're reading this, as Atlas closes the gap, as Mars waits. And here's the hook you can't escape. If the ancients were right about the timing, the direction, the payload, what else were they right about? What happens after the return of the sky gods? What role do humans play in the next phase of their plan? Are we invited to Mars as partners or assigned to Earth as tenants? And if Atlas is the herald, what's following behind it? I want to hear from you. Right now, drop a comment. Where are you reading from? Have you studied Sumerian history? Have you noticed the mainstream articles about new translations of old texts suddenly appearing? Did you think that was random? It's not. It's part of the conditioning. So remember this. The Mesopotamian clocks weren't counting down to a myth. They were counting down to an event you are now living through, an event called 3i Atlas. And the question that should keep you awake tonight isn't whether the ancients were telling stories. It's whether they were trying to warn us about what comes after Atlas arrives. But Mars isn't just any planet, and the ancients knew it. Hidden in their clocks is a countdown no one's dared to decode. You've been taught the word Anunnaki is just mythology. Dusty carvings of winged beings holding pine cones, standing before stylized trees, wearing horned crowns. Pretty art, primitive religion, harmless stories. That's the line, that's the comfort. But the tablets don't just tell stories, they record instructions. The Enuma Elish isn't only a creation epic, it's an operations manual. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The shapes, the measurements, the references to heavenly boats and way stations. The repeated description of a red world as a hub. It's all there, not as superstition but as blueprint. And here's what they've hidden from you. The details the Sumerians recorded about the Anunnaki line up with the science of 3i Atlas, down to the decimals. The gods didn't just arrive. They arrived with breath of heaven, gases and vapors to give life to the red soil. They didn't just build, they prepared the fields and stirred the waters. They didn't just leave, they promised to return when the measure of cycles was complete. The measure of cycles, 3,600 years. Atlas's travel time, Atlas's payload, Atlas's timing. Think about that. The earliest civilization we can document, thousands of years before telescopes, recorded a chemical recipe and a time interval that matches a real interstellar object, now on final approach. That's not imagination. That's either a memory of something witnessed or instructions received, a transmission, a training program for the species they were cultivating. And if you've been paying attention, you know this is exactly how conditioning works. Drip the story into myth. Repeat it until it becomes background noise, then watch generations later as the real thing arrives and no one resists because they think it's destiny. Now here's the part that should make your pulse spike. The Anunnaki didn't just describe what they did, they described why. They said they came for resources. They said they engineered a worker race. They said Mars was their station before Earth. They said humans were given image and likeness to serve a function. The texts are explicit. Humans were created to be useful, not free. And if Atlas is the next phase of that plan, then what does that make us now? Ask yourself, why would a civilization capable of interstellar travel and planetary engineering bother with clay tablets and myths? Because that's how you build a control program in a species without digital archives. You etch it into their culture. You encode it in religion. You teach them stories that shape their thinking for millennia. You make them believe they're special so they won't question their purpose. You make them believe the return of the sky beings is inevitable, so they'll accept it when it happens. You build compliance right into their mythology. And look at how effective it's been. Today, millions are fascinated by the Anunnaki. Some believe, some scoff. But both groups are obsessed. Both groups keep the name alive. Both groups are primed to react when the signal comes. This isn't random, this is programming. And the arrival of Atlas is the execution phase. Think about the engineering problem. Terraforming Mars with chemical payloads delivered over thousands of years isn't just a technical feat. It's a psychological one. You can't have a species on the adjacent planet panicking, interfering, sabotaging. You need them to cooperate, to monitor, to serve as sensors. You need them to build the very infrastructure that tracks your project. And what have humans done? We've built orbiters, landers, rovers. We're streaming data back to Earth in real time. We're publishing it openly. We're doing their QA for them without even realizing it. That's not an accident. That's design. And here's what no one wants to consider. The Anunnaki might not be a race at all. They might be a project, a system, an AI seeded across time, a collective intelligence operating through proxies. We've been looking for humanoid gods when we should have been looking for instructions. We've been waiting for faces in the sky while the real contact came as ratios, trajectories, and activation sequences. Atlas isn't a messenger, it's a mechanism. Now ask yourself, why is the name Atlas so perfect? In Greek myth, Atlas was the titan who held up the sky, who bore the weight of the heavens, a servant condemned to carry the cosmos, just like us. Just like the role described for humanity in the tablets. Coincidence? Or did someone inside the system name it that way, as a wink to those paying attention? I want you to stop and really feel the gravity of this. The Anunnaki legacy isn't ancient history. It's current events. The blueprints aren't symbolic. They're operational, and 3i Atlas is following them, step by step. And here's the hook you can't escape. If the Sumerians recorded the first delivery, and Atlas is the last, what's next? Once Mars is transformed, do they step forward? Do they reveal themselves? Do they take their station back? Or do they stay hidden, managing from a distance? While we serve as their stewards on a planet we thought we were colonizing, but we're actually just prepping for their return. Drop a comment. Where are you reading from? How many of you have actually looked at the Sumerian star maps? How many of you have traced Atlas's path on a chart and seen it overlay those ancient constellations? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Remember this, the Anunnaki legacy isn't a myth to debate. It's a script being enacted. And the question you should be asking yourself tonight, as you stare at the ceiling, isn't whether those old carvings were real gods or not. It's whether 3i Atlas is about to make them real again. What you're about to hear isn't myth. It's a blueprint, a step-by-step plan written thousands of years ago. You've been told space is random, objects drift, comets wander, rocks tumble, gravity and chance, nothing more. That's the story. That's the comfort. But what if the void isn't random? What if what you're looking at isn't a comet at all, but a courier, following a map so old it predates our planet? Because when you take Atlas's path and you run it backwards, not just years, but millennia, epochs, eons, you get a shock. Its trajectory doesn't come from nowhere. It traces a line straight back to the thick disk region of our galaxy, a fossilized piece of time where ancient stars and ancient matter still swirl. The cradle, the place where our solar system itself was born. Atlas isn't visiting. Atlas is returning. Look at the math. You've been shown simple orbits, parabolic paths, pretty animations. But the actual data, the little numbers tucked into obscure preprints, the papers no one cites tell a different story. The minor course corrections, the vector changes, the slight but measurable deviations that can't be explained by jets of outgassing alone. Subtle but deliberate. A straight shot, not a random drift. Like a ship using gravitational slingshots as checkpoints on a pre-planned journey. Each alignment with Venus, with Mars, with Jupiter, improbable if random, inevitable if navigated. Now stretch your mind. The Earth was molten 4.6 billion years ago. Our oceans were steam, our atmosphere poison, our crust newborn. And somewhere, out there, an object began a slow arc inward. Not a comet, but a time capsule. Not a rock, but a system. Moving not with urgency, but with inevitability. A migration plan before mammals, before cells, before carbon even settled into our bones. What does it mean when something has been travelling toward us since before we existed? What does it mean when the timetable is older than our species? And here's the part they don't want you to see. The math fits. The deceleration fits. The timeline fits. This isn't a visitor stumbling into our system. This is a mechanism designed to arrive exactly now, exactly when we can watch but not interfere. Exactly when we can record but not alter. Exactly when Mars can be transformed before we get there. Think about the scope of intelligence required for that. We think we're clever because we can plan a mission 10 years out. We think we're patient because we can build telescopes to last decades. Imagine building a project to unfold over millions of years. Imagine designing a trajectory to intercept a solar system, just as its resident primates begin launching robots to another planet. Imagine coding your engineering into an object that can survive cosmic radiation, collisions, and interstellar emptiness for geologic time. That's not technology. That's architecture on a cosmic scale. And it isn't just the path. It's the signature. Atlas's carbon dioxide ratio, its water ice fraction, its activation at 4.4 AU, all of it makes sense if you assume not random chemistry, but a payload set to trigger at a precise solar distance. Like a capsule warming up as it nears the right temperature, the right pressure, the right sunlight. It begins to outgas, not because it's melting, but because it's waking. Ask yourself, how many other objects have we written off as comets because we didn't have the instruments to see the pattern? How many interstellar visitors have already passed through, seeding, testing, calibrating? How many centuries of random meteor showers and unexpected atmospheric anomalies were just phase 1 of a plan we're only now recognizing in phase 4? Now here's the hook you can't escape. If Atlas has been on this journey since before Earth formed, then whoever sent it has been watching longer than we've been alive. They've seen every extinction, every ice age, every civilization rise and fall. They've waited until our skies were full of cameras and our minds full of myths. They've waited until the perfect moment to show up. And here they are. I want you to comment. Right now. Have you plotted Atlas's path on a star chart? Have you overlaid it on the Sumerian constellations? Have you noticed the articles about strange course corrections being buried in academic footnotes? Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you've seen. Because this isn't just information, this is evidence. Remember this. Reverse mapping Atlas's journey doesn't take you to empty space. It takes you home. Home to where your planet was born. Home to where your DNA was coded. Home to where your myths began. And the question you should be asking tonight isn't whether Atlas is arriving. It's what happens when something finally returns to claim the system it set in motion before you ever existed. And those blueprints don't just tell us where Atlas came from, they tell us where it's going next. You've been told it's coincidence, a fluke. A comet passing through our system just happens to skim near Venus, then Mars, then Jupiter. Gravity assists. Random luck. That's the official line. That's the comfort. But you and I both know patterns when we see them. Ships use ports. Couriers use stops. Pilots use waypoints. Nothing in deep space just happens to line up this perfectly, unless it's planned. And 3i Atlas? It's planned. It's following hidden checkpoints carved into the geometry of our solar system, like grooves on a vinyl record. Look at the numbers. Atlas wasn't just headed for the inner system. It entered at an angle that lined up with Venus's orbital plane to within a fraction of a degree. It passed within a narrow window that gave it a gravitational nudge without destabilizing its trajectory. It timed its approach to coincide with Mars's orbital position at the moment of closest pass. And when it slingshots near Jupiter, it won't just be in the neighborhood, it'll be at the exact point of maximum leverage to adjust its inclination toward the ecliptic. These aren't random brush-bys, these are scheduled stops. These are celestial toll booths. And here's what really should make your skin crawl. Every time Atlas hits one of these checkpoints, its telemetry shows a spike. Outgassing patterns change. Minor course corrections happen. Dust emission fluctuates, as if some internal system is responding to an external trigger, as if some dormant mechanism is waking up at each port, like a spacecraft refueling or updating its navigation code before the next leg of the trip. Ask yourself, how many comets have been doing this without us noticing, because we weren't looking for the pattern? How many have used Venus's gravity, then Mars's, then Jupiter's, to calibrate their descent? How many times has our solar system been treated as a cosmic gas station by technology so old and so subtle we mistook it for ice and dust? And now think about what that means for Atlas's mission. If it's using planetary alignments as checkpoints, it's not improvising, it's executing a program. That program ends at Mars. That program begins with a payload timed to the red planet's current atmospheric and magnetic conditions. That program depends on us being exactly where we are right now, technologically able to observe, but not yet able to intercept. Remember, we plan space missions years in advance. They're proud of sending a probe to an asteroid with a rendezvous window of a few months. Whoever sent Atlas has been planning a trajectory spanning millennia, hitting moving targets across billions of kilometers with perfect precision. That's not just superior technology, that's superior patience, that's superior intent. And here's where the hook sharpens. The Sumerians wrote of the watchers of the sky, who mark the stations and measure the paths for the returning gods. They listed way stations, they described alignments, they etched star maps with specific points, circled points that match Venus, Mars, Jupiter. They didn't call them checkpoints, they called them gates. And now, thousands of years later, Atlas passes through the same gates. You still think that's coincidence? You're wrong. Dead wrong. This is why NASA doesn't hold press conferences about the anomalies. This is why the ESA buries course correction data in obscure PDFs. This is why planetary scientists who point out the patterns find their funding cut. Because acknowledging this isn't just acknowledging Atlas is artificial. It's acknowledging our entire solar system has been used like a racetrack by something far older and far more advanced than us. I want you to stop and ask yourself, if Atlas hits each checkpoint exactly as predicted, what happens at the final one? What's at Mars that's worth a 3,600-year delivery schedule? Why time its arrival for the moment our species can watch but not act? Why seed myths of gates and stations into the first written language so we'll have the script already in our heads when it arrives? That's not luck, that's control. And here's the call to action. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Have you compared Atlas's path to ancient star maps? Have you noticed how each news story about course anomalies disappears within hours? Have you seen the trending hashtags shift from alien threat to alien hope? That's not organic. That's narrative management. That's preparation. Remember this. Hidden checkpoints aren't just in space. They're in your mind. They're the myths you were fed. They're the cycles you were taught. They're the expectations shaping how you'll react when the skies over Mars start to glow. And the question you should be asking tonight, as Atlas threads its way through the gates, isn't whether it will reach Mars. It's what happens at the last checkpoint and what comes through after it. And if you still think it's drifting, what you're about to see will prove it isn't, because this comet may be flying under its own power. You think the dust storms on Mars are just weather. Red winds whipping across dead plains. Harmless, random, natural. That's what they told you. That's what you were supposed to believe. But dust carries information. Dust carries signatures. Dust carries signals. And when you start looking at the patterns, not just the color, but the shapes, the timing, the chemical fingerprints, you see something you weren't supposed to see. Mars isn't just receiving Atlas, Mars is already speaking. Look at the data. Every orbiter, every rover, every lander has been capturing images of the Martian surface for decades. Thousands of photos, millions of pixels. And buried in those pixels are anomalies no one explains. Linear streaks on dunes that appear overnight, then vanish. Patches of darkened regolith that shift in geometric shapes rather than random swirls. Plumes rising from fissures with chemical compositions that don't match the surrounding terrain. Signals, messages, test patterns. You think that's dust? You're wrong. Dead wrong. And here's what the insiders whisper. The recurring slope lineae, those dark streaks, NASA calls possible briny flows. They line up with Atlas's trajectory path projected onto the Martian surface. The unexplained methane plumes detected by Curiosity, they peak in cycles that mirror Atlas's approach intervals. The thin trails of CO2 frost left in the polar caps. They form glyphs, not letters, but ratios, 8:1, over and over again. Ask yourself, how does a planet with no known life, no known tectonic activity, and no known industrial process produce coordinated, repeating chemical signatures, timed to an interstellar object's arrival? It doesn't. Not by itself. Something is happening under the surface. Something that's been primed. Something that's been waiting. Now think about what Atlas is carrying. That 8:1 CO2 mixture. Water ice for humidity. Trace minerals for catalysts. The perfect cocktail for kick-starting atmospheric change. And think about what's already on Mars. Frozen reservoirs of CO2, perchlorate-rich soils, polar ice caps, dormant gases trapped in regolith. What happens when you add the payload to the primer? You don't just terraform, you activate. You trigger a system already installed. The Sumerians wrote of dust that speaks, of winds that carry orders, of red storms hiding the breath of heaven. Poetic, yes, but also functional. They described Mars not as a barren world, but as a prepared one, a way station equipped and waiting. And now Atlas is about to deliver the ignition key. And here's what should shake you. NASA and ESA know this. They've seen the anomalies. They've classified the images. They've restricted public data. Do you know how many raw Mars images vanish before they hit the public archive? Do you know how many compressed datasets lose their highest resolution frames? That's not sloppy archiving. That's filtering. Because if you saw the unedited pictures, you'd know. You'd see the shapes. You'd see the glyphs. You'd see the patterns carved into the regolith like circuit boards on a chip. Think about it. Our rovers are sitting right on top of the circuitry, feeding data back to Earth, unwitting instruments in someone else's activation sequence. We're not explorers. We're sensors. We're the diagnostic readout for a planetary-scale device built before we had language. And Atlas's arrival is the moment the device powers up. Now here's the hook you can't escape. If Mars is already speaking through its dust, who is listening? Who is decoding? And what happens when the message is complete? Does Atlas simply drop its load and drift away? Or does it trigger a response, a signal, a beacon, a door opening? And if that door opens, what comes through? I want you to comment. Right now, where are you watching from? Have you noticed the way Mars images get blurred at the edges? Have you seen the wind streaks forming numbers? Have you tracked the methane spikes? Tell me. Because your observations might matter more than you think. Remember this. Signals in the dust aren't random. They're messages. They're warnings. They're instructions. And the question you should be asking tonight, as you watch Atlas closing in, isn't whether Mars is dead or alive. It's who prepared it to speak and what it's about to say when the key arrives. But propulsion isn't the scariest part. The scariest part is why the people we trust to tell us the truth have gone dark. You think Atlas will just pass by, a comet, a show in the sky, a news cycle. Some dust, some gas, some headlines, then gone. That's what they're telling you. That's the bedtime story. But comets don't line up like this. Comets don't carry payloads tailored to a single planet. Comets don't warm up at exactly 4.4 AU like a switch being flipped. Atlas isn't arriving, Atlas is activating. Look at the timeline. October 29th, 2025. Perihelion at 1.44 AU, just inside Mars's orbit. Right when the red planet is at its northern autumn equinox, the moment when both hemispheres share equal sunlight, when the polar caps begin sublimating. Right when the Martian atmosphere is most ready to accept new gases. Right when our orbiters and rovers are all lined up to see it happen. You think that's luck? You're wrong. Dead wrong. And here's what the engineers inside the agencies won't say on the record. The models show what happens if Atlas releases its payload. Pressure spikes. Temperature rises. Chemical reactions cascade. Dormant compounds on Mars's surface react with injected CO2 and water vapor. Clouds form. Ice melts. Polar deposits release trapped gases. Within months, the air thickens. Within years, it's breathable in pressure suits. Within decades, it's a thin, cold, but living atmosphere, terraforming compressed from millennia into a generation. But it's not just about chemistry. It's about control. Because whoever times the activation controls the narrative. Mars becomes habitable not by human effort, but by alien design. The first sunrise over a warm Martian sea won't be ours. It'll be theirs. And we'll be standing there with cameras and hashtags, thinking we're explorers while we're actually just witnesses to an engineering project we didn't start and can't stop. Ask yourself, why now? Why not 1,000 years ago? Why not 1,000 years from now? Because now is perfect. We have the tech to watch, but not to intercept. We have the myths in our heads, but not the weapons to challenge. We have the infrastructure on Mars to send them the data they need, but not the capability to claim the planet first. We've been prepared. We've been timed. Atlas is arriving at the moment of maximum efficiency and minimum interference. And here's the detail that will keep you awake. Our rovers aren't just exploring. They're already part of the activation sequence. Every drill sample, every atmospheric sniff, every seismograph ping, all of it goes into databases that are publicly open but also quietly mirrored in servers you'll never access. Every reading feeds models not just on Earth but somewhere else, somewhere watching, somewhere waiting for the green light. Think about the Sumerian texts again. When the time of the return is complete, the red station shall breathe again. That's what they wrote. That's what they etched into clay for no one in their lifetime to see. That's what's happening now. The activation sequence isn't just chemistry, it's prophecy, it's timing, it's theatre. And here's the hook you can't escape. What happens after the switch flips? What happens after the dust settles, the plumes rise, the air thickens? Does something land? Does something emerge? Does the sky over Mars open like an eye? Or do they never need to show themselves at all because we've done exactly what they wanted, prepping, monitoring, cheering? I want you to comment, right now. Where are you reading from? Do you remember the first time you heard the date, October 29th, 2025? Do you notice how every article about Atlas uses calming words, harmless, fascinating, visitor, and never words like engineered, payload, activation? Tell me. Because your awareness is part of the test. Remember this. Atlas isn't a comet. It's a key. Mars isn't a destination. It's a device. And the question you should be asking tonight, as the countdown ticks toward perihelion, isn't whether Atlas will activate Mars. It's what happens after, and who shows up to claim the world we've been taught to call our future. And that silence hides a pattern stretching across the inner solar system, a path drawn in plain sight. You think nothing will change. You think Atlas will pass, Mars will stay red, and life will go on. That's what they want you to believe. That's the sedative. But if Atlas activates, if the payload disperses, if the dust primes, if the chemistry cascades, then Mars won't stay Mars. It won't stay dead. It won't stay silent. The red planet you've seen in textbooks, in rover selfies, in NASA press releases gone. What rises in its place will be something new, something alive, something claimed. Picture this. First, the sky. Thin, pale, almost invisible. Then, weeks after the release, a haze forms. Not random, not natural. A blanket of CO2 clouds spreading across the equator. Temperatures tick upward. Pressure climbs. The rover's instruments scream anomalies. Methane plumes spike. Water vapor begins to circulate. At first, it's thin wisps, then storms. Real storms. Not dust devils, not dry gusts, but atmospheric systems. Swelling, growing, moving across the globe. The red planet begins to breathe. Now look at the surface. Ice caps start to sweat. CO2 sublimates. Buried water rises. Ancient salts dissolve and trigger chemical cascades. Dark streaks spread down crater walls, not as isolated briny flows but as networks channels feeding into basins, basins filling into lakes. The recurring slope lineae the scientists dismissed. They expand, merge, connect. Patterns form that look less like geology and more like irrigation, more like design. And here's the terrifying part. It won't take centuries. Not if Atlas's payload is as engineered as the evidence suggests. Not if it's coded to catalyze what's already there. Models hidden from the public show decades. Some insiders whisper months. You think that's impossible? You're wrong. Dead wrong. Ask yourself, how do we react when Mars stops being a desert and starts looking like a mirror of Earth's earliest days? Do we celebrate? Do we panic? Do we fight for a world that isn't ours to claim? Or do we realize too late that this wasn't for us at all? And here's what the ancient texts imply. The awakening isn't just about atmosphere, it's about memory. The Sumerians wrote of Mars as a red station, abandoned but not forgotten. They wrote of technologies buried under dust. They wrote of machines that sleep until breath returns. What if those weren't metaphors? What if warming Mars doesn't just unlock water and air but also hardware? Systems buried under regolith, engines dormant in the poles, relics waiting for the right conditions to stir. Think about it. Our rovers have already found metallic anomalies, buried deposits that don't match known geology, strange reflections under the surface. They call them basalt intrusions, iron-rich meteorites. Maybe. Or maybe they're pieces of something older, something dormant, waiting for the red awakening to switch them back on. Now imagine this. You wake up one morning and the headlines say it. Mars has clouds. Mars has rain. Mars has lakes forming in real time. The red dot you've always known is changing before your eyes. Humanity's collective dream, hijacked. Our future, rewritten. And we'll be told to cheer. We'll be told it's progress. We'll be told it's hope. But deep down, you'll know. It wasn't us. It wasn't ours. And here's the hook you can't escape. What wakes up with Mars? What stirs in the dust when the sky thickens and the ground thaws? Do we get a habitable planet? Or do we get a stage prepared for something else entirely? I want to hear from you. Right now, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Would you cheer if Mars turned blue and green? Or would you wonder whose world it really became? Have you noticed how news outlets are already seeding phrases like Mars could be habitable sooner than expected? Conditioning, preparation, narrative control. Remember this. The Red Awakening won't just change Mars, it will change us. It will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the solar system. And the question you should be asking yourself tonight isn't whether Mars will come alive. It's what comes alive with it, and whether humanity has any say at all in what happens next. A path that leads straight to a plan to remake a world faster than science ever thought possible. Picture this. A clock you didn't know existed is ticking. A countdown you were never told about is reaching zero. While you sleep, while you scroll, while you worry about gas prices and elections, the most important event in human history is closing in at 30 kilometers per second. Atlas isn't drifting, it isn't meandering, it's on approach, and every second that passes, every orbit that tightens, brings us closer to the switch flipping. The final days before activation, the days we were never meant to survive unchanged. Think about the atmosphere of secrecy. NASA says nothing. ESA delays data. China releases carefully worded one-liners. Russia stays silent. Meanwhile, insiders leak fragments, unexpected acceleration, plume anomalies, payload density inconsistent with natural bodies, words buried in footnotes, numbers hidden in graphs, phrases scrubbed from press releases. If Atlas were just a rock, why the edits? Why the redactions? Why the sudden resignations? Why the budget shifts? Because they know, they've run the models, they've seen the projections, and what those projections show terrifies them. Here's what you're not being told. The window for Atlas's activation isn't decades, it's days. The alignment is perfect. Mars is in position. The atmosphere is thin enough to receive, but thick enough to amplify. The polar caps are primed. The equinox is the trigger. This is why the date October 29th, 2025, is burned into closed-door memos. It isn't just perihelion, it's ignition. It's when the cosmic switch is thrown, and Mars changes forever. Ask yourself, why now? Why not centuries ago? Why not wait longer? Because right now is the sweet spot. We have satellites in orbit, we have rovers on the ground, we have telescopes watching. But we don't have interceptors. We don't have planetary defenses. We don't have the tech to interfere. We can only watch. We can only measure. We can only record. Exactly what an engineer would want from a monitoring system. Exactly what an architect would need from its workers. And here's where it gets darker. The countdown isn't just physical. It's psychological. Look at the media. Look at the headlines. Mars may be habitable sooner than we thought. Terraforming isn't science fiction anymore. Could ancient myths hold scientific truth? That's not random reporting. That's narrative prep. That's conditioning. That's the drip feed of acceptance. By the time Atlas activates, you'll have been primed to cheer. You'll call it a miracle. You'll hashtag number new Mars, while the world you thought was yours gets rewritten. Now zoom out. This isn't just one comet. This isn't just one planet. This is a pattern. Ancient texts describing cycles of 3,600 years. The return of the gods, the awakening of the red station, the breath of heaven upon the dust. The math matches, the direction matches, the payload matches. And if the ancients recorded the last countdown, then what you're living through now isn't discovery, it's repetition. It's the next iteration of a script humanity has forgotten, but was never meant to escape. Think about what the countdown really means. It isn't just Mars becoming habitable. It isn't just another planet turning blue. It's the moment you realize your species has never been in charge. That your civilizations, your religions, your science were all scaffolding for this moment. That you've been building a stage without knowing who would walk onto it. And when Atlas flips the switch, the curtain rises. And you're not the main character. You're the audience, maybe even the extras. And here's the hook you can't escape. What happens when the countdown ends? Do we wake up to news alerts about Martian storms and methane spikes? Do we see live feeds of clouds forming where there were none? Do we celebrate the birth of a new world? Or do we finally realize that the birth we're cheering is actually the reclamation of something that was never ours? I want you to comment. Right now. Where are you watching from? Do you mark the date in your calendar? Do you look at Mars through your telescope at night and wonder if the change has already begun? Have you noticed how often Atlas disappears from mainstream coverage, replaced by fluff stories, entertainment news, sports scandals? That's not coincidence. That's distraction. That's buying time until the clock hits zero. Remember this. The countdown isn't years away. It's here. It's now. And the question you should be asking tonight, as the clock ticks down in silence, isn't whether Mars will awaken. It's what happens to humanity the moment it does, and whether you're ready to live in a solar system that was never ours to begin with. Picture this. A black sky over Mars. Thin air. Silence. Then, at perihelion, a flash you can't see with your eyes but your instruments do. A surge of particles. A plume of gas that isn't just gas. The switch flips. Atlas doesn't crash. It doesn't explode. It doesn't behave like any comet you've ever studied. It opens, it releases, it activates, and what it leaves behind isn't a tail of dust but a world in metamorphosis. You've been told comets are dirty snowballs, that their tails are nothing but ice and carbon monoxide, that they leave no trace once they're gone. But Atlas isn't a comet. Atlas is a container, a delivery system, a seed. And when the switch flips, the seed opens. Think about the ratios. 8 parts CO2, 1 part water ice, plus trace catalysts no one has identified publicly. Add them to a planet with trapped volatiles, frozen oceans, perchlorate-rich soil, dormant methane reservoirs. Result? A chemical chain reaction that leaps across a world. That's not sublimation, that's ignition. Now imagine the timeline. Day 1, nothing visible. Day 2, haze in the upper atmosphere. Day 5, pressure sensors on rovers, register spikes. Day 10, storms form. Day 20, polar caps recede. Day 30, methane plumes double. Day 60, dust clears and dark channels streak across old riverbeds. Day 90, the first shallow lakes appear in low basins. All of it powered, not by human engineering, but by an object we mistook for a comet until it opened. And here's the detail that will haunt you. Atlas doesn't just leave behind gases. Instruments already detect micrograins embedded in its outgassing plumes, grains with complex organic molecules, rare isotopes, structures like scaffolds. NASA calls them dust particles, but insiders call them seeds. Because in planetary engineering, you don't just need air and water, you need templates. You need catalysts that can assemble, replicate, propagate. You need life starter kit, and Atlas carries it. Ask yourself, what happens when those seeds settle into Martian soil? Do they catalyze chemistry? Do they awaken dormant microbes? Do they build biofilms? Do they form the scaffolding for something larger? Because terraforming isn't just about atmosphere, it's about ecosystems. And if Atlas is truly the switch, then Mars isn't just about to become habitable, it's about to become inhabited. Think about the myths again. The Sumerians wrote of gifts from heaven falling upon the red station. They wrote of the breath of the gods carried by vessels of ice and fire. They wrote of the awakening, after which the servants of the sky would return. For thousands of years we've read those lines as poetry, but what if they were logs? Technical notes rendered in the language of a pre-literate world? And here's the darker question. Does Atlas stay, or does it go? Does it simply drop its payload and slingshot out of the system? Its job done. Or does it linger, hovering in Mars's orbit, a caretaker, a sentinel, a transmitter? Because seeds need tending, switches need controllers, and if Atlas carries the key to Mars's rebirth, what else does it carry that we haven't yet seen? Now think about us. Humanity, watching through telescopes, cheering on Twitter, posting grainy images of Martian clouds, believing we're seeing a miracle, believing we're watching our future unfold, not realizing we're watching our role diminish. Because the moment the switch flips, the narrative changes. Mars stops being a dream. Mars becomes a claim staked by an intelligence patient enough to wait millennia, precise enough to deliver an engineered payload across interstellar space, and powerful enough to hide in plain sight. And here's the hook you can't escape. What happens next? Once Mars is warm and wet and seeded, do its true owners arrive? Or do they never need to because we'll do it for them? We'll build habitats, run experiments, keep the data flowing. We'll turn their station into a functioning outpost. We'll be the caretakers of a world not ours, voluntarily, proudly, blindly. I want you to comment, right now. Where are you watching from? If Atlas leaves behind a transformed Mars, will you still call it our future? Will you volunteer to colonize a planet seeded by someone else? Will you trust the air you breathe, the water you drink, the microbes in the soil? Or will you finally ask the question we've avoided since Atlas appeared? Whose world is this really? Remember this. The switch isn't an event, it's a transition. And the question you should be asking tonight isn't whether Atlas will leave a payload behind. It's what that payload will become, and whether you're ready to live next door to a world awakened not by human hands but by an ancient, invisible plan that just reached its final phase. And if you think it hasn't already started, wait until you see what's been hiding in Mars's soil all along. Picture this. You're staring at Mars through a telescope. The haze has thickened. The ice caps have retreated. There's a greenish shimmer at the terminator line where no green should be. The instruments don't just pick up pressure changes anymore. They pick up radio noise, patterns, pings. Not from Earth, not from our orbiters, from somewhere else, somewhere in Mars's shadow. And then, without warning, your feed cuts to static because the signal saturates the band. The moment you were never supposed to see has arrived. You've been told that if they ever come, it'll be with ships. Lights in the sky, huge, cinematic displays. But that's human thinking. That's Hollywood conditioning. You've been trained to expect invaders or angels, giant saucers or shining beings. You've never been trained to expect this quiet, invisible. Step by step, first an object disguised as a comet, then a chemical payload, then an atmosphere, then seeds. And only when the stage is set do the true owners step forward. Not with a bang, with a claim. Look at the timing. Atlas at perihelion, atmosphere thickening, methane spiking, then new signals on frequencies we don't use. Subtle at first, pulses, like a heartbeat, then coordinated bursts, then modulated streams. NASA calls them natural plasma events. ESA says instrument glitches. Amateur astronomers pick them up on ham radios and can't sleep for nights. You think that's chance? You're wrong, dead wrong. Because what's happening now is the next phase of a process older than us. You've watched the terraforming. Now you're watching the summoning. Ancient texts call it the return. The sky gods, who left a way station on the red planet, promised to come back when their work was ready. That promise wasn't metaphor. It was a timetable, and we're living inside it. And here's the detail no one dares put in the press release. The signals don't just come from a point source. They come from multiple nodes in Mars. Orbit faint, cold, stealthy. Some call them debris clouds, some call them frozen fragments of Atlas, but their orbits are too precise, their positions too regular, their movements too synchronous. They're not fragments, they're stations, and they're waking up. Think about the choreography. Atlas arrives, drops atmosphere, drops seeds, leaves behind orbiting fragments. Signals start when the planet reaches a critical chemical threshold, as though the whole thing is a countdown. As though the arrival isn't a fleet crossing interstellar space at once, but a system reassembling itself from pre-positioned components, waiting for a trigger to wake them. That's not a visit. That's a homecoming. Now pull back the camera. You've been told Mars was our backup plan, that we'd plant a flag and call it the first new Earth, that we'd be the ones to terraform it. But if you control the sky above Mars, you control everything on the ground. If you arrive before the first human set foot, you write the ownership papers in invisible ink. And if you can shape an entire world, you can shape the humans who land there. Not through war, through environment, through dependence, through awe. Ask yourself, do you think SpaceX, NASA, ESA haven't noticed the signals? Do you think their silence is ignorance or policy? Do you think the sudden delays in Mars mission timelines are coincidences or compliance? Because the window for planting a human flag on Mars closed the moment Atlas flipped the switch. The planet you dreamed of colonizing is no longer unclaimed. It's already occupied not by cities but by systems, not by settlers but by sentinels. And here's the darker implication. Maybe the owners never left. Maybe they've been here the whole time, dormant, hidden, monitoring those mysterious chemical deposits at Mars's poles, those unexplained magnetic anomalies, those fleeting blips in satellite telemetry. We called them glitches, we called them coincidences, we laughed them off. But patterns emerge when you line up decades of data, patterns that look less like noise and more like signatures. Now think about Earth, because this chapter isn't really about Mars. It's about what happens to you when you realize the narrative you've been living in is a lie. When you understand that the red planet isn't a frontier but a mirror, a test, a stage, you've been conditioned to cheer as it transforms, to see rebirth, to feel pride, to believe you're part of something, but what you're part of is an experiment in mass psychology. How will 7 billion humans react when the sky gods keep their promise and return? Will we worship? Will we resist? Will we collapse? I want you to comment. Right now. Where are you? Have you tracked the new radio signals? Have you seen the odd alignments of debris around Mars? Have you noticed the shifts in official Mars mission schedules? Don't shrug it off. Your observations matter, because the story isn't unfolding in some distant laboratory. It's unfolding live, in real time, in your lifetime, with your data. Remember this. The arrival you've been taught to expect already happened. It didn't look like a fleet. It looked like a comet. It didn't sound like a trumpet. It sounded like static. It didn't come to invade. It came to activate. And now the true owners are stepping forward, not to ask permission, not to negotiate, but to take possession of what was always theirs. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether they're here. It's what happens when they stop hiding, when the signals become voices, when the fragments assemble into something you can't dismiss as debris, when the first message isn't an introduction but an instruction. Because the moment of instruction is coming, and when it does, you won't just be watching Mars transform, you'll be watching the next phase of your species unfold. Picture this. Midnight in Houston. Screens glowing in a sealed conference room, heads bowed over headphones, a waveform pulsing across a monitor. Not noise, not static, a pattern, a rhythm too deliberate to be random. The first message, not to the public, not even to all the agencies, to a handful of people who thought they'd been watching a comet, and now they're listening to something that isn't supposed to exist. You've been told interstellar contact will be math, prime numbers, a beacon from the stars. You've been conditioned to expect a one-off ping, a simple hello. But that's not what this is. This isn't a distant, we're here. This is a local network. A handshake between nodes already in Mars orbit, whispering across frequencies we barely monitor, flipping between bands like a living thing. It's not calling out, it's synchronizing. Look at the evidence. Last week, Atlas's so-called debris fragments began pulsing in unison, first in microwave, then in ultraviolet bursts, caught only by a few research satellites. Then in VLF radio that amateurs started to hear as faint warbles. Each time Mars's atmosphere thickened another notch, the pulses grew stronger, the modulations more complex. NASA says, no comment. ESA says, technical review ongoing. The press barely notices, but you're noticing. You're here. You're listening. And here's the part no one's telling you. The pulses aren't just data, they're commands. Every time a new pattern appears, the debris shifts its orbit fractionally. The stations adjust like pieces of a chessboard. If you plot their positions over time, they're drawing a geometry around Mars, a lattice, a net, as though they're building a perimeter, or maybe a receiver. We're not eavesdropping on a beacon, we're watching a system assemble itself. Now think about the content. Analysts who've broken the modulation into its base frequencies report recursive structures data inside data, harmonics encoding symbols, patterns that resemble chemical formulas. Others say maps. Others say gene sequences. You think that's coincidence? You're wrong, dead wrong. Because what I'm about to tell you shatters the last safe assumption you had. The first message from Atlas isn't a greeting. It's a recipe. Yes, a recipe. Stripped of harmonics, the primary layer spells out ratios, gases, temperatures, timelines. A protocol for atmospheric engineering, exactly matching the changes already detected on Mars. In other words, the message is instructions for what's already happening, not for us, for the seeds, for the catalysts. For whatever Atlas left in Mars's soil, it's not telling us what to do, it's telling its own technology what to become. But buried under that, in a deeper layer of modulation, there's something else. Symbols no one can match to chemistry or physics. Ancient-looking glyphs. Some analysts say they echo Sumerian cuneiform shapes. Others say they're coordinate grids. A few whisper their names. Names of places, names of beings. We don't know. Because no one has seen the full dataset. No one outside a tiny circle of insiders. And those insiders aren't sleeping anymore. Ask yourself, why now? Why send the message only after Mars's atmosphere reaches a certain density? Why wait until human instruments are guaranteed to pick it up? Is this an accident, a leak? Or is this part of the plan, a slow reveal, designed to condition not just Mars but us? Because you can't watch a world wake up without feeling something. You can't see alien instructions humming through the sky without your own thoughts changing. That's the point. And here's the darker implication. If the message contains recipes, could it also contain commands for us? Subliminal triggers embedded in the signal, emotional patterns, frequencies that alter human brainwaves. You think that's science fiction? Ask DARPA how easy it is to influence cognition with rhythmic pulses. Ask neuroscientists about entrainment. Then ask why the signal's secondary harmonics sit exactly in human alpha wave ranges. Coincidence? Or conditioning? Think back to the ancient texts again. The sky tablets, the Sumerians described voices of the gods etched in stone. What if those weren't myths but memory? What if this has happened before? What if we've heard this message before and built our first cities in response? And now, at the threshold of spacefaring, we're hearing it again, the next set of instructions for the next phase of our usefulness. I want you to comment right now. Have you tried recording the signal yourself? Have you picked up strange patterns on your shortwave radio? Have you seen the orbital maps of Mars's fragments lining up like a net? Drop your location, drop your data, because this isn't just an event to watch. This is an event to document, and maybe your observations are the only uncensored record left. Remember this: the first message from Atlas isn't a hello, it's a protocol, a self-executing script playing out across a whole planet. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether you're witnessing history, it's whether you're part of it, whether the signal's real target is Mars or you. Because when the next layer of the message decodes, it might not be a recipe at all, it might be an instruction, and you won't be ready for what it tells you to do next. Picture this. It's 3:33 a.m. in every time zone, not by chance, not by clock, by signal. Phones buzz, radios hiss, instruments spike. All across the planet, anyone tuned to the right band hears it at the same moment. A tone, a pattern, then a voice that isn't a voice. Not English, not Sumerian, not any known language. But you understand it anyway, like a dream. The signal has shifted. It's not whispering to Mars anymore, it's whispering to you. You've been told alien contact will come through diplomacy, through math, through carefully encoded messages we can debate in universities. You've been conditioned to expect something slow, negotiable, full of time to react. This isn't that. This is instantaneous, global, personal. Atlas's network flips from seed instructions to human frequencies in one move. Not to warn, not to negotiate, to instruct. Look at the pattern. Last week, the fragments formed a net. Yesterday, they synchronized their pulses with the Schumann resonance. Today, the modulation rides directly on the frequencies used by GPS, satellites, even cell towers. It's inside the infrastructure now, not hacking it, riding it, amplifying through it. Using our own systems as a carrier wave. If you're watching this, you've already been exposed. That's not scare talk, that's physics. And here's the part no one wants to admit. The message contains imperatives. Analysts call them suggestions. Cognitive scientists call them templates. But buried in the harmonics are behavioral triggers. Sentences that translate inside your head as urges. Not commands like, do this now, but subtle directives. Look at Mars. Prepare. Wait. Simple words, but they spike neural pathways associated with attention, anticipation, compliance. DARPA knows. NASA knows. That's why the press releases are silent. Ask yourself, have you been dreaming of Mars lately? Have you felt drawn to look up at night? Have you caught yourself thinking about leaving Earth, about survival, about the next world, more than usual? You think that's your own curiosity? You're wrong. Dead wrong. That's the signal doing its work. Conditioning, priming, aligning. Because what I'm about to show you should terrify you. The instruction layer of the signal contains coordinates, not of Mars, of Earth. Locations of launch sites, data centers, reservoirs. It's mapping us as precisely as it mapped the red planet, as though setting up logistics, as though preparing for movement. But whose movement? Ours? Theirs? Or both? Think back to the Sumerian awakening hymns. They speak of songs from the sky that enter the hearts of men and prepare the workers for the new fields. They describe dreams sent before the dawn to soften the minds of the chosen. We laughed at those as metaphors, but now you're living inside them. You're not reading history, you're reliving it. And here's the darker implication. The instruction isn't about learning their language. It's about teaching your nervous system to respond to their cues. Like Pavlov ringing a bell, like code rewriting itself. By the time you consciously recognize the message, your subconscious has already adapted. You'll think you're choosing, you'll think you're curious, you'll think you're inspired, but you're being prepared. Now picture the next step. Mars's atmosphere thickens. Seeds germinate, the net stabilizes, the signal intensifies. At a threshold you can't see, something shifts. Not on Mars, in you. In all of us. A mass behavioral pivot that looks spontaneous but isn't. We'll call it a movement. We'll call it destiny. We'll call it our own idea, but it won't be. It'll be the instruction fulfilled. I want you to comment. Right now. Are you feeling it? Are you seeing strange dreams? Are you drawn to certain frequencies? Are you hearing odd tones at night from nowhere? Drop your experience. Because documenting this isn't just history. It's survival. The more data we have, the better chance we have of seeing the pattern before it completes. Remember this. The instruction isn't coming. It's here. It's live. It's in the air. The wires. The devices. It's in you. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether you're receiving it. It's what you'll do when the next phase begins, when the instruction stops priming and starts directing. When the voice in the signal doesn't just tell you to look up, but to move. Picture this. It starts small. A headline you scroll past. Record number of amateur radio operators tune into Mars frequencies. A week later, sudden spike in volunteer sign-ups for Mars mission simulations. Another week, global trend. Millions join new online Red Dawn communities, discussing Mars. No leader, no single organization, no announcement, just a shift. Quiet, viral, self-organizing. People doing things they can't explain. And every time the Atlas signal spikes, participation spikes with it. You've been told revolutions need leaders, that movements rise from ideology, from speeches, from events. You've been conditioned to believe history is written by names and faces, but this isn't that. This is a movement without a manifesto, a migration of thought, a surge of attention toward Mars that looks like collective curiosity but acts like a directive. It isn't being led, it's being pulled. Look at the data. Social networks tracking hashtags related to Mars report a perfect correlation with the signal's amplitude. Recruitment for STEM programs focused on aerospace jumps 400% in weeks. Donations to Mars-related nonprofits explode overnight. Kids start drawing red planets in school without knowing why. Astronomical clubs form spontaneously in cities where no one cared before. And the strangest part? No one thinks it's strange. Everyone explains it away as a cool trend. You think that's organic? You're wrong. Dead wrong. Because what I'm about to show you should snap you out of your comfort. Analysts who overlay Atlas's signal harmonics with human behavioral data find identical patterns. The signal peaks at 1944 UTC. Google searches for how to go to Mars peak minutes later. The signal modulates with a 7-day rhythm. Online Mars groups hold red sessions on the exact same cadence without any coordination. This isn't coincidence. This is entrainment. The same way fireflies sync their flashes, the same way heart cells beat in unison. You're watching a species fall into step with an alien metronome. And here's the hidden layer. It's not just interest, it's logistics. The people most affected by the signal aren't random. They cluster around key skill sets, engineers, medics, pilots, geneticists. People who, together, could seed a colony. People who, together, could build and run a way station. People who could step into roles without training because something inside them is whispering what to do. Not thoughts, not words, patterns, compulsions. You call it inspiration. They call it the call. Think back to the Sumerian selection hymns. They describe those marked by dreams who walked into the desert without knowing why and built the great stones where none had stood. History dismissed them as priests, fanatics, mystics. But what if they were simply people responding to the last iteration of the signal? What if every great unexplained migration, every sudden leap in construction, every burst of technological alignment wasn't just human will, but external coordination? Ask yourself, why now? Why us? Why at the exact moment our rovers and orbiters can provide real-time monitoring, do we suddenly feel an irresistible draw to Mars? Why, as Atlas's seeds take root, do we start acting like seeds ourselves, uprooting our lives, changing our paths, funneling our skills? Because this isn't just terraforming Mars, it's terraforming us. And here's the darker implication. You won't know when you've crossed the line. When curiosity becomes compulsion. When interest becomes instruction. When your decision to join that program, to donate that money, to quit your job and move near a launch site isn't yours at all. By the time you ask, you've already done it. By the time you think, you've already moved. And no one around you will question it, because they're moving too. That's what a movement without leaders looks like. That's what a species-level directive feels like. Now imagine the endgame. Mars, reborn. A ready-made environment. A net of stations around the planet. A self-selected, self-trained workforce of humans who believe they're pioneers, but are really the next phase of a plan older than their species. Atlas doesn't need to send ships. It doesn't need to land troops. It just needs to flip the right switches inside the right minds at the right time. We'll do the rest. Willingly, proudly, blindly. I want you to comment. Right now, are you feeling it? Are your kids suddenly obsessed with Mars? Are you seeing people around you changing careers, making odd choices, talking about the future in strange new ways? Drop your observations, because documenting this may be the only way to tell a movement from a migration, and maybe, just maybe, the only way to break a spell is to recognize you're under it. Remember this, the movement isn't coming, it's here. It's not an app you can delete, it's not a hashtag you can mute. It's a frequency riding every screen, every wire, every thought. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether you're part of it. It's what happens when the movement stops being about going to Mars and starts being about what happens after we get there. When you realize you weren't joining a colony, you were being assembled. Picture this. Airports swelling, highways clogged, trains packed, people on the move, but not because of war, not because of famine, not even because of disaster. They're moving without knowing why. They're booking flights to Cape Canaveral, to Baikonur, to Vandenberg, to Kourou. They're streaming toward deserts where launch sites glitter at night like beacons. It doesn't look like panic. It doesn't look like chaos. It looks like pilgrimage. Quiet, steady, inevitable. The assembly has begun. You've been told history's great gatherings are sparked by speeches, by prophets, by causes. You've been conditioned to believe movements require leaders, posters, manifestos. But this isn't that. This has no slogans, no figurehead, no campaign. It's an undertow, a draw in the bones. Families uproot themselves. Students drop out overnight. Retirees sell homes they've lived in for decades. And when you ask them why, they can't explain. They just say, I felt called. Look at the pattern. In California, recruitment at SpaceX's facilities triples overnight. In Kazakhstan, Baikonur sees caravans of strangers camping outside the gates. In Guyana, locals report foreigners showing up with tents and solar panels, waiting. In Florida, Cape Canaveral beaches flood with people staring at empty launch pads, as if expecting rockets to rise without schedules. They're not protesters, they're not tourists. They're converging, gathering like iron filings around magnets. And every magnet points to Mars. And here's what the agencies aren't telling you. Security forces have orders not to disperse them, not to interfere. Because deep down, the agencies know this isn't stoppable. Every time they try to block access, the crowds only grow. Every time they try to explain the signal away, more arrive. They've run the numbers. They see the curve. By the time Atlas completes its Mars orbit, the movement will be global, irreversible. Billions thinking about one thing, moving toward one destiny. Now dig deeper. The assembly isn't random. The people showing up aren't just dreamers and fanatics. They're surgeons, coders, biologists, welders, pilots, farmers. Every skill you'd need to seed a colony. The signal hasn't just triggered migration, it's curated it, selected for utility. Imagine a sorting algorithm running invisibly across the population, tugging at just the right minds, pulling just the right hands. Not chaos. Recruitment. Quiet, elegant recruitment at planetary scale. Think about the Sumerian gathering hymns. They tell of the chosen, who left their homes and stood at the gates of the sky. They describe workers of every art assembling in fields where no temple had yet risen. Historians called it religious myth. But what if it was memory? What if we're seeing the same story replayed in real time, the assembly of a workforce for a project they don't understand, called by a signal they can't resist? Ask yourself, why are governments cooperating silently? Why haven't they declared martial law? Why no emergency broadcasts warning against mass migration? Because maybe they're part of it. Maybe the instruction hasn't just reached the public. Maybe it's in the halls of power. Why else would leaders suddenly push accelerated Mars programs they can't afford? Why else would agencies that once competed share data like brothers? Why else would billionaires burn fortunes chasing rockets like obsessed gamblers? Because the assembly isn't just happening outside the gates, it's happening inside them too. And here's the darker implication. What if the assembly isn't about leaving Earth? What if it's about preparing Earth? Because not everyone can go to Mars, not everyone can be a colonist. So why gather billions? Why pull them toward launch sites, deserts, coastlines? Unless the assembly itself is the point. Unless the act of converging, of concentrating human energy in predictable nodes, serves a purpose. Think of antennas. Think of biobatteries. Think of ritual. The assembly could be more than logistics. It could be activation. Now imagine the next phase. Launch windows open, rockets rise, but not enough to carry everyone. Crowds don't disperse. They wait. They camp. They build shantytowns around the pads, refusing to leave. Supplies dwindle, but cooperation blooms. Food shared, tools traded, new hierarchies form overnight. It doesn't feel like a refugee camp. It feels like a rehearsal, like people practicing for life on another world. Without knowing why, they're already living as colonists, already obeying the invisible plan. I want you to comment, right now. Have you seen it where you live? Have you noticed new groups forming around observatories, space centers, even universities? Have people in your own circle started talking about going to Mars with an urgency that feels unnatural? Drop your stories, because the assembly isn't just something happening on screens. It's happening in your town, your family, maybe even in you. Remember this, the assembly isn't about choice. It's about convergence. You're not deciding to go, you're being pulled. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether people are gathering. It's what happens when the gathering completes, when the last node is filled, when the signal that called them flips to its next instruction. Because if Atlas can summon humanity like this, what else can it make us do? Picture this. You wake up before dawn. The news banners scroll faster than you can read. The Mars feeds are no longer grainy red dust. They're alive. Clouds curling over Valles Marineris. Thin fog hanging in Hellas Basin. Plumes of water vapor at the poles like breath in winter air. Shadows moving under that fog that shouldn't be there. This isn't a trick of the cameras. This isn't CGI. This is real time, and no one is pretending it's normal anymore. You've been told Mars is dead. A frozen desert. A corpse of a world. You've been conditioned to expect progress in decades, in slow, careful increments, a few microbars of pressure, a few degrees of warmth. But that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing leaps. You're seeing the kind of change you measure in hours, not centuries. You're watching the red planet cross a line it's never crossed in human history. The threshold, look at the data. Orbital spectrometers show a 12% rise in atmospheric density in less than a week. Methane spikes so intense they max out detectors. Ozone signatures where there was none. Microbe-sized particulates floating above Gale Crater. And the fragments around Mars? They're no longer passive. They're firing tiny bursts into the upper atmosphere. Not weapons. Seeds of some kind. Catalysts. You think that's a comet's afterglow? You're wrong. Dead wrong. That's an operating system installing itself on a planetary scale. Now imagine what that means for every narrative you've been fed. NASA can't call it a glitch. ESA can't call it a sensor anomaly. Even the amateur astronomers can see the color change at the limb. People all over Earth are recording the same thing on their backyard scopes. Mars is no longer red. It's streaked with blue, with green, with white veils of vapor. A dead world coming to life before your eyes. Not slowly, not naturally. On cue. And here's the part no one dares to say out loud. The seeds aren't just chemical. Instruments on the Perseverance rover picked up filaments on its mast cam, translucent strands moving against the wind. NASA's press release called them possible dust artifacts. Insiders call them first growth. Because terraforming isn't just atmosphere, it's ecosystems. If you want a world to live, you don't just warm it, you inoculate it. And Atlas did. Think back to the Sumerian sky garden tablets. They speak of plants of fire and waters of breath, descending to the red station to make it fertile for the return. Scholars thought it was a myth about agriculture. But what if it was a field report? What if you're watching the same process repeat itself, step by step, exactly as described thousands of years ago, a dead planet seeded, watered, awakened as a staging ground for something older than your civilization? Ask yourself, why are the agencies still silent? Why no emergency broadcast? Why no acknowledgement of what billions can see with their own eyes? Because maybe this is the plan. Maybe the silence is the final conditioning, the unspoken agreement to let the process unfold without panic, to let you watch without understanding until it's too late to intervene. And here's the darker implication. Crossing the threshold isn't just about Mars, it's about us. The moment Mars becomes unmistakably alive, our role changes. We stop being explorers, we become intruders, or caretakers, or something worse. Because if Mars is now alive, it has an owner, not us. Maybe it always did. And the signal that's been whispering at you, the dreams you've been having, the choices you've been making, they're not random. They're aligning you to that reality, conditioning you to accept it. Now picture the next step. Mars's sky turns turquoise. Shallow seas form where rovers once trundled. The net of fragments blossoms into visible structures glinting in sunlight. And at the same time, on Earth, the assembly reaches its peak. The self-sorting of skills complete. The people already living like colonists at launch sites. A world waking up over there. A species waking up over here. Two halves of a plan older than either world. I want you to comment. Right now, have you seen the color change in your own telescope? Have you noticed new weather patterns on Mars feeds? Have you caught yourself feeling proud, excited, like you're watching our world? Ask yourself why. Ask yourself whose world it really is. Because documenting your own reaction might be the only way to tell the difference between awe and programming. Remember this, the threshold isn't a finish line, it's an opening. You're not just watching Mars become alive, you're watching the door to whatever comes next swing open. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether you're ready to go to Mars. It's whether you're ready for who or what steps through that door once the planet is ready to receive them. Picture this. Dawn on Earth, midnight on Mars. Every live feed, every telescope, every amateur camera pointed at the red planet at the same moment. The haze is gone. The polar plumes have spread into a milky sky. Shadows drift across the surface where there should be none. And then it happens. Not a ship, not a fleet, a shimmer. A column of light at the edge of Valles Marineris, thin as a thread, but bright enough to burn into every sensor. It flickers once, twice, 3 times, and then stays. The door has opened. You've been told arrival means hardware, ships, saucers, silhouettes in the sky. You've been conditioned to expect a cinematic entrance, but that's not what you're seeing. This isn't an arrival. This is a reveal. Something was always there, buried, cloaked, dormant. Atlas wasn't just terraforming a planet, it was unlocking a lock. And now the lock has clicked. Look at the pattern. For weeks, the fragments in orbit have been shifting their lattice into a perfect geometry, like pins in a keyhole. Last night, the last node fell into place. This morning, the column appeared. Spectrographs show it's not plasma, not dust, not a trick of light. It's structured. It pulses at frequencies that match the signal's harmonics. Its base sits on a spot mapped by ancient Sumerian charts as the landing valley. Coincidence? You're wrong. Dead wrong. Because what I'm about to tell you should change how you see everything. Atlas wasn't a comet. It was a courier, a key. Its payload wasn't just gas and seeds. It was a code. When released into Mars's environment, the code triggered changes in soil, air, and orbiting fragments until the conditions matched a hidden threshold. And at that threshold, a buried system woke up. The column you're seeing is not a signal. It's a gate. Now imagine the implications. Gates aren't built for decoration. They're built for passage. The Sumerians wrote of the return path that shone like a spear when the way station was ready. They said the gods would walk again when the breath of heaven had made the red land soft. Scholars called it myth, but you're watching the myth materialize in real time. And here's the detail no one dares to whisper. Multiple columns are appearing. Tiny at first, flickers on the limb, then stabilizing into visible shafts. Each one sits at a node of the orbital net. Each one pulsing in sync, like doors aligning on hinges, like an arrival hall preparing itself. Not for us, for them. Ask yourself, why now? Why at the exact moment the assembly on Earth reaches critical mass? Why at the moment when billions of humans are already self-sorting into launch sites, training camps, deserts? Could it be that the colonists aren't going to Mars to build our future? Could it be they're being assembled to serve a function when the door opens? Like keys turning in another lock. Think of the choreography. A dead world transformed, a net of stations deployed, a global population entrained, and at the moment of peak alignment, the door opens. This isn't improvisation, this is execution. A plan that's been ticking toward this second for thousands of years. And here's the darker implication. The door doesn't necessarily lead from there to here. It could lead from here to there, or from there to somewhere else entirely. We're assuming the columns are for arrivals. What if they're for departures? What if the purpose of the assembly is not to bring someone to Mars, but to take something or someone from Earth? Now picture the next step. The columns stabilizing, the harmonics shifting from instruction to invitation. The signal you've been feeling in your bones your whole life now focused like a beam. Not a call to watch, a call to move. And people moving without hesitation. Not fear, not panic, compulsion, migration, walking into rockets, into capsules, into unknown vehicles, as if stepping into a temple. Believing they're fulfilling a dream, never realizing they're fulfilling a plan. I want you to comment, right now. Have you seen the columns on your telescope feed? Have you noticed your friends or co-workers talking about the call with a glazed look? Have you dreamed of stepping into a shaft of light? Drop your stories, because what you record now may be the only record of how free will felt before the door finished opening. Remember this, the door isn't a spectacle, it's a mechanism. You're not watching history, you're watching a function activate. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether the door leads in or out. It's who built it and whether we're about to greet our makers or become their cargo. Picture this, a launch pad at night, sodium lights blazing, wind cutting across empty concrete, crowds pressed against fences, silent, watching something that isn't on any schedule. No rockets are stacked, no countdown clocks ticking, and yet people move, slowly at first, then all at once. They're climbing fences, crossing lines, walking straight toward the pad as if they know exactly where to stand. Phones drop, bags fall. It's like sleepwalking, except their eyes are wide open. They're answering a call you can't hear. The gate on Mars is open, and now, somehow, so is the one here. You've been told that when the moment comes, it will be announced, that leaders will stand at podiums, flags will wave, news anchors will narrate. You've been conditioned to expect a single clear event. But that's not what you're seeing. This isn't a launch. This isn't an accident. This is a synchrony. The first step through the gate isn't happening in a capsule. It's happening in people. Look at the pattern. The columns on Mars stabilize. Their harmonics shift from instructions to a new frequency no one can trace. At the same time on Earth, launch pads light up with aurora-like flickers. Not electrical faults, not lasers, the same spectral signature as the Martian shafts. NASA calls it atmospheric anomalies. The Air Force says, no comment. But sensors at amateur stations pick up bursts of VLF radio, perfectly timed with the flickers. And at each burst, another wave of people moves. You think that's coincidence? You're wrong. Dead wrong. Because what I'm about to tell you should freeze your blood. The shafts on Mars aren't just visible. They're now detectable from Earth as gravitational ripples. Not strong enough to shake buildings. Just strong enough to resonate with certain biological rhythms, heart rates, brain waves. The signal that's been priming you for months has switched modes. It's no longer preparing, it's activating. Now imagine the implications. Billions of people subtly entrained, sorted by skill and location. Launch pads doubling as ritual sites. Mars's columns pulsing in sync with Earth's. This isn't migration. This is transfer. Not by rocket, by resonance. The Sumerians wrote of bridges of light that took the chosen across the sky without wings. We called it myth, but what if it was a technical description? What if you're about to see it live streamed? And here's the detail no one's whispering on camera. Satellites over launch sites have captured microlensing events, momentary distortions in space-time, right above the pads. Not lightning, not heat shimmer, folds, bubbles, like the air itself is thinning, exactly the kind of effect you'd expect from a transit gate. And each time it happens, a few people disappear from drone footage. Not running, not hiding, just gone. One frame here, next frame not. Ask yourself, why is no one reporting this? Why aren't families of the missing screaming on live TV? Because maybe they're gone with consent, maybe they left notes, maybe they're not missing, maybe they've crossed. You don't panic about a trip you think you chose, and you don't rebel against a plan you think you're fulfilling. Think of the choreography again. Atlas delivers the code. Mars transforms, the net assembles, the door opens, Earth's population aligns, launch sites become nodes, people vanish into flickers. Mars gains an atmosphere and a workforce simultaneously. No ships needed, no invasion necessary. Just a plan, so patient and precise that the species becomes its own transport. And here's the darker implication. The first step through the gate may not be physical, it may be informational. Consciousness transferred first, bodies later, or remade there, or used here for something else entirely. You've been trained to think of travel as moving mass from point A to point B. But what if you're the data? What if you're being uploaded into a system that will instantiate you on Mars once the environment is ready? Would you even know it happened? Now picture the next phase. The flickers stabilize. The signal rises to a pitch you don't hear but feel. People stepping into invisible thresholds at launch pads all over the world. Live streams glitching just as they cross. Then, on the feeds from Mars, new shapes appearing at the bases of the columns. Human silhouettes in Martian dust where no humans have landed. Breathing air we didn't make, walking ground we didn't claim. Smiling, waving, thinking they're pioneers while fulfilling a blueprint older than history. I want you to comment, right now. Have you noticed people in your city vanishing into this movement? Have you seen videos that cut out just as someone steps into light? Have you felt a pull you can't explain toward a place you've never been? Drop your story, because documenting this might be the only proof left that there was a choice at all. Remember this, crossing over isn't a launch, it's a trigger. The question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't whether someone will step through the gate. It's whether you already have, and whether the person watching this right now is still entirely here. Picture this. A live stream you didn't expect to see. Not an official feed, not NASA, not SpaceX. A shaky phone video from a launch pad in Florida. People stepping into nothing, flickers of light, vanishing. A second later, another stream, this one from Mars orbit, the columns still pulsing, the dust swirling, and then shapes emerging. Human shapes, but not exactly. Taller, glimmering faintly, like they're refracted through water. They're walking out of the haze, across a plain that was dry rock last week and now ripples like wet sand. The other side isn't empty. It isn't a blank canvas. It's already occupied. You've been told Mars would be hard, hostile, a place for pioneers and survivalists. You've been conditioned to picture barren deserts, domes, hydroponic farms. But that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing a landscape already remade. Sky not red but copper gold. Ground not dust but moss-like crust. Strange translucent towers curling up from old craters like frozen smoke. And scattered among them, figures. Not all human, not all alien, something in between. Look at the pattern. For months the signal primed you. For weeks the movement assembled you. For days the gates opened. And now, on Mars, the thresholds are bleeding through. The arrivals aren't stepping into shelters. They're stepping into structures that weren't there before. Geometry's too precise to be natural, too alien to be ours. The air around them sparkles with motes. Not dust, not ice, something living. Sensors on orbiters pick up biogenic signatures, oxygen, methane cycles, chlorophyll analogues. And the fragments in orbit? They're now gone, disassembled. Mission complete. And here's the part that should keep you awake. The figures on Mars are not surprised. They're not gasping, not panicking. They're moving like people stepping into a familiar home. They're being met, not by ships, by shapes sliding out of the mist, tall, jointed, wearing no suits, eyes like pale fire. They reach out. They don't speak. But the feed's audio spikes at the same harmonics as the signal. They're communicating without words. The first contact you were taught to dream about is already over. It didn't happen at a White House lawn. It happened on a plane you can't name. Ask yourself, what if the ones waiting there aren't strangers? What if they're us, reshaped? What if Atlas wasn't just building a world but building a version of us that could live there? Because the people stepping into those towers aren't leaving footprints like ours. Their bones have already started to change. The signal wasn't just instruction, it was adaptation. We weren't being invited, we were being remade. Think back to the Sumerian cycle tablets. They wrote of the workers who crossed the sky and put on the forms of the hosts to serve in the garden beyond. Scholars called it allegory. But what if it was a field manual? What if this has always been the pattern a species selected, trained, transferred, modified, deployed? What if Earth was never the main stage but just the nursery? And here's the darker implication. If Mars is the nursery's next room, what's beyond Mars? Because the gate doesn't have to end there. Once you've been transferred, adapted, rewritten, you could be sent anywhere. Another world, another star, another purpose. You think you're watching the end of a story? You're wrong, dead wrong. This is the beginning. Now picture the final step. The columns on Mars brightening, then thinning, then vanishing. The figures on the plane walking into the towers and not coming out. The motes rising into the sky like spores. The atmosphere thickening until the surface blurs from orbit. Within hours, the live feeds cut. Every stream goes black. Official accounts tweet technical issues. Amateur accounts are banned. And in the silence, a single pulse on every frequency. Not instructions, not recipes, just one word, in a language you don't know but feel in your bones. Complete. I want you to comment. Right now, tell me if you've seen the last images. Tell me if you've heard the final pulse. Tell me if you felt something shift inside you when it hit. Because maybe this isn't just a story you're watching. Maybe it's a test. Maybe your reaction right now is part of the data. Remember this. The other side isn't a destination. It's a reveal. You weren't promised a new world. You were prepared for a new role. And the question you should be asking tonight, long after this video ends, isn't what's waiting on Mars. It's what's waiting for you when you realize the moment you've been dreaming about was never colonization, never exploration, never independence. It was induction. Picture this. Silence. No more feeds from Mars, no more updates from NASA, no more leaks from insiders, just static. The story cut off mid-sentence. The world shrugs, moves on, pretends it never happened. But you don't forget. You remember the haze, the columns, the shapes. You remember the word burned into your nerves. Complete. You've been told life goes on. Work, bills, elections, sports. You've been conditioned to bury the impossible under the mundane. But late at night, when you're alone, when the screens hum just a little too loudly, you still hear it, the pulse, the rhythm, the instruction. Not gone, just quiet, waiting. Look around. The movement didn't stop. The assembly didn't dissolve. The people who left didn't come back. The ones who stayed, they've changed. Subtle, but you notice. They talk about Mars as if it's still calling. They dream of towers, of light, of voices. They're waiting for the next trigger. And deep down, so are you. Because here's the truth no one will admit. The gate was never about Mars. It was about us. Proof that humanity can be steered, primed, harvested, deployed. Proof that the experiment worked. Atlas wasn't the end. It was the test run. And if the cycle repeats as the ancients warned it, would then Earth itself is next. Ask yourself, what happens when the columns rise here? When the sky over your own city flickers? When the word isn't complete but begin? Will you resist? Or will you walk forward, silent, unblinking, like the others? I want you to comment right now. Where were you when the feeds cut? Did you hear the last pulse? Do you still feel it in your chest at night? Because your answer matters, not to me, to them. Remember this. Stories don't end when the cameras go dark. They end when the plan does. And the plan isn't finished. The gate on Mars was just the rehearsal. The real door is still waiting right above your head.